Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar today. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I hope the weather is nice and kind to you. My name is Mariah Brown. I am the Strategic Partnerships Manager here at Action Network. I am joined by two panelists that I think you're going to grow to appreciate and hear about their hard work and hopefully want to connect with them very soon. Today, we're discussing building membership power and grassroots mobilization. This will highlight the Action Network and Call Hub integration, which, if you aren't familiar with, you'll get to know. And then we're going to highlight a very awesome use case with the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation. I am joined by Munib.
Hi,
Hi, how's it
I'm
going?
good. How are you, Mariah?
Thank you. Munib is the Executive Assistant of Communications and Political Action Department at the Ontario Secondary School of Teachers Federation. So happy to have you on board with us today. Hello.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. We're also joined by Bridget, the Solutions Engineer of CallHub. Thank you for joining us, Bridget.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thank you for coming, both of you. This will be I think, a pretty seamless webinar today. So we're shooting for around the 30 mark, but we're happy to go over if folks have some questions. We hope that you have some questions. The Q&A should be open. I'll double check on that once we get started, but feel free to drop questions as we continue through the presentation. There will be time at the end, and then maybe if during their segments, if there's something that they could speak on and answer for you, we'll hopefully try to get to those. Again, the agenda for today is we're going to go through the Ontario use case, and then we're going to run through Call Hub, the really cool and intuitive features that they have to offer. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the integration with Action Network. If you aren't familiar, hopefully you all are familiar with us. But yeah, that is our run of show today. And of course, there'll be time for Q&A. I will pass it over to Munib.
Hi there. My name is Munib Sajjad. My pronouns are he and him. As Mariah said, I'm an executive assistant in the Communications and Political Action Department over at the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation. So we represent over 60,000 secondary teachers, which is high school and education workers across Ontario. We were founded in 1919 as a major trade union. And of course, we have many job classes, not just teachers, educational assistants, support staff. We also represent members at in universities as administrative staff. We're dedicated to advocating for quality, publicly funded education, negotiating strong collective agreements, protecting our members' rights, and ensuring workplace safety for all. And of course, championing equity and social justice in our schools and campuses. I do also want to give a shout out to a team that we've been working with called Point Blank Creative. They are an ad agency, a PR agency, and they were really wonderful in guiding us through the uses of the tools and how we could use digital strategy to really get into the work of our deep organizing culture that we were getting into. So I wanted to give some shout outs to Nat Wilson, Jaffer, Amanda, Navi, Cameron, and Rachel, who were excellent team members that guided us through this process. And we'll take you into a bit of the journey of the work that we've been doing here. Next slide, please. Yeah. So I want to also just give you a reality check. We just started this work, so I can't even say that we are like the best example. When Marvin and the team at Action Network reached out, I didn't think that we were doing it right, and I was like, ugh, like I had like massive imposter syndrome. I was like I don't know if we're worthy to be that showcase example. But I do think that it's important to really share, and that's how they sold it to me as well, is that, what's worthy is the exploration of the tools and the potential of those tools. And for a union that I would argue is in transformation, we saw the use of these tools of really building on success of how we could better reach our members. But I will say that we did not utilize every tool and integration piece that, Action Network and Call Hub has. There was a lot that I was learning as part of the team that was helping coordinate. We made a lot of errors, and as organizers know, internationally, that errors are always something that's going to happen. Mistakes will occur. But of course, how we debrief and how we have valuable lessons learned. But we saw the use of the tools as an ambitious way, in a way that we could be more metrics driven in our approach. And how can we enhance peer-to-peer communication? And of course, building on a fundamental culture of organizing. So again, TLDR, but like the reality that we had was that the process of how we organize our members and how we function as a union was also kind of imperfect. We're getting into a contract fight with a government that, has fundamental control over all funding. over public education. So the process of our organizing was also imperfect, but it was learning, it was experimental, and it was new territory for us. Like I said, we didn't use all aspects of the tools and integrations, and of course, errors occurred along the way. But also, I have to really give some focus to the environment that educators across Ontario are facing. Our membership, of the 60,000, of part of over 180,000, educators across the province are facing worsening conditions at their work sites. Public education is being defunded actively since 2018, and there's been a destruction of democracy, where the education sector with school board structures where, elected chairs and elected trustees have oversight and the community has a voice over what's going on with their education system is all being taken away. And they're installing CEOs in school boards now as a deliberate path to privatizing education, which we should see education as a common good. So members are facing underfunding. They're being under-resourced. They're facing burnout. Now, one can imagine how someone feels when they're jaded. When you're asking them to take on an action, they're going to be asked to do more with less, more and more. And as a union that doesn't have a culture of deep organizing, asking to do a little more was also something we were like, okay, we got to start somewhere. Next slide, please. Yeah. So part of that core problem is that in order for us to really get into the work, we can't be relying on what the employers give us. And I'm not saying that bosses everywhere are bad, but in our context in this sector, the employers and bosses are deliberately withholding membership data. And that data includes emails, phone numbers, personal. And we've even seen school boards develop portals where they allow the union to engage their members and to email them based on their structures and don't give them access to the data, but the employers will oversee what union communication can look like. Now, that's a problem for us in our fundamental way of democracy, in our autonomy to protect our members, especially when bosses, will infringe on the rights of our members. We may have organized to exist, but labor legislation that oversees the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation and unions in education do not enforce the need to provide member data. We may have access to members through getting their dues and maybe some basic information, but in the context of reaching a member organically, we don't have that set provision. And again, like I said, in a union that does not have a traditional culture of deep organizing, starting from here was very difficult, but we had to start somewhere, and it was very necessary. So we go to a vision. That vision for us was how we build member power. And for me, it's like I need to coming out of the university world, I used to organize in student unions like the hypothesis, what is our thinking that we need to have in that really core question that we need to answer. And for me, when I came to OSSTF some years ago, successful and effective campaigns significantly increase member engagement in their union and boost the collection of member contact information. They must volunteer to give that information because they need to see a purpose. And we will be stronger and we'll have longer victories, longer lasting victories for our members and all for those that depend on us. And I will say that a campaign in organizations I've been a part of that I've observed, the campaign is used very illustriously, and as if, we got to have a flashy ad, a flashy title, and build it, and they will just come. But that lacks core foundation and fundamentals. The focus has to be on the person, right? And their story and their journey and their voice and how they see agency in that work. And that requires building an organizing strategy with a focus that centers the member and doesn't just treat them as just a number. So, with our campaign goals, with that hypothesis in mind, we looked at our bargaining survey as a lead up to our contract negotiations and giving the mandate to our bargainers at the table with the government as a way that we could start building member power to build the conversation. So we called the campaign Your Contract, Your Voice. We've never actually done this type of deep organizing when it came to the bargaining survey. It was kind of just like, we'll email, and if they want to do it, they can. And we did see a lot of great things said in previous rounds. But I will say that it's lacking a big thing where you got to see strength in numbers and more members voicing what they see as, the mandates that they want to see in bargaining. That builds a fundamental power structure. It builds like an agency in the process where once you engage them early on, they're going to start wanting more. and how do we keep building that, functionally as part of our work. Our students are underfunded and our members are frustrated and feeling disrespected. So our primary goal here was to organize to mobilize and unite our membership to win a strong new collective agreement. Now, for me, as a strategist here, the strategic sub goal was to clean up our data and run the union's first ever massive structure test. For those who don't know, a structure test is an evaluation of participation. And as organizers know, this is something so important as we get into the work. But we also had to think of the core philosophy when we're engaging in this type of work, that these tools, they may be flashy and nice, but it's not the goal to use. It's part of the strategy. And that's where we saw that these tools, CallHub and Action Network, uniting the two together to really give us that powerhouse punch to actually really build what we need to learn, how to move forward, and how do we strengthen ourselves from there. Now, the tech stack. We used quite a few tools, but the main three that I'll really focus on, but obviously the main two, is Action Network and CallHub. Now, Action Network, for me, when I think about the anatomy of any campaign and any structure, Action Network for us was the brain. It was a central repository for all of our campaigns data, our communications, and mobilization. We jumped to Action Network some years ago, maybe about three, and we shifted from another email tool to Action Network to our daily newsletter, communication space. But we explored the tool a little more about how we could use more and more strengths of it. So we saw this as the brain, as a way to be our thinking and our heart. And of course, we still sent emails from this. Call Hub, I envisioned as the arm. It was our way of actually speaking directly to our members through their phones. We've used CallHub in the past for mobilization for elections because our members like taking involvement in the elections because education unfortunately is so politicized, because our government makes it that way. We need to make sure we're taking political action in the field. So we did robocalls, mass texts, ways that we could just push the vote. But we lacked the peer-to-peer. And that's where we saw the use of CallHub in this as the peer-to-peer method of like engaging the member where they're at if we couldn't physically be around them. Typeform, the survey tool that we actually used, was actually really important for us. And it gave a way for integrating our action network into CallHub, I mean, into Typeform itself. And Typeform, we wanted to make sure that when members are giving their ideas or their thoughts about what we need to bargain for, what their issues are, it was going to be anonymous. We had to protect their anonymity. But we saw this tool, this survey tool, as a way that we could, hyperlink and connect Action Network directly, and we could be a little more metrics driven in that. Now it comes down to the integration path. For those that are on this, we connected the tools via an API integration, and this will be shown here. This was done way before, so I wish I had a screenshot ready around like how to do it right here. But I'm sure the experts here will teach you that. But I went into the Action Network backend, and I actually got our 32 character key, and I implanted that directly into our CallHub account. And in that, you'll see that there. So I added that into the Action Network. And from there, I was able to run imports of various tags and reports. And I'll get into that a little more. Now, what's key is our execution of the workflow. We actually launched our campaign in late August 2025. And this was at our leadership conference and saying, all right, we got to go hard, everybody. So we got to get as many bargaining surveys out. And it took us some time to get there, and we actually built a bit of a short window of once back to school happens, let's get our members to update their contact information. So we sent them out with QR codes to our Action Network forms, and it was all going to be added into our central account. And by the third week of September, we sent our first email blast using Action Network to our entire membership list. And with that, every email, well, almost every email, we try to send a follow-up text as refined from our Action Network repository itself. And it was a text broadcast, and it went to our entire mobile list. Now, what was also really critical for us, and what was the key thing around integrating the tools, was running reports and queries to make sure that the mobile numbers that we were reaching out to. We're not getting repeat messages. So anyone that completed the survey They were tagged, using an Action Network form as saying completed, and we had them filtered out to make sure we're only texting people that did not complete the survey. So we imported and we did consistent review over this data using, Action Network and CallHub together and running those consistent reports and queries on Action Network itself. Now we had to keep a balanced rhythm too. So we had 6 emails in total. Originally we planned for 5, but we did end up extending the survey to make sure we're capturing the last minute few people that wanted to do it. We had some local leaders ask if they could extend the time, so we obliged because more voices, all the better. So we sent 6 emails out in 4 follow-up texts. And it was, of course, always updated with exclusions, which we'll get into in a bit. Now, here's an example of how we connected our action network. Type form, we had everyone do the survey. It was all anonymous. But what's great is that we were able to hyperlink them directly to a form, an Action Network form at the end. Now, the promise was that, you will win a prize. You can win a prize if you join this as a contest entry, but you will also stop getting reminders around the survey. And obviously, we know that in order to get a message out, you're not going to send it out in one push. You're going to do some follow-up work. Every organizer knows the follow-up work to tag someone to take the action is going to be very critical. This form allowed them to stop overhearing about the survey. They may have heard it in like other sites and other spaces, but at least on phone and email, they would stop getting it. And this will show you the back end of our form, and you could see the overall total of our form of how many people actually chose to take part in our contest, and of course to be like, stop getting reminders, I'm good now. And you see that tag there that says completed 2025 bargaining survey. That was very important for us to connect our call hub to make sure things were refined. And this is an example of a survey of an email reminder that we sent out. I think this was our fourth one there. And you could see the exclusions that we had. So every time we sent a blast, we used the queries function to keep a regular, check on like who was completed and who's not. And part of that exclusion was completed the survey. And because we have members that are French speaking as well, we kept a separate correspondence with them, obviously all in French translated. So we made sure that only English members were getting that, and our custom fields in Action Network are separated by language. So we use that as an exclusion as well. But you'll see a little example at the bottom of the screen there that says, like part of the other values that we have that we wanted to exclude. We felt that, obviously, we don't want to have the employers and bosses see the communication happening. And we also want to get away from being dependent on employer emails. So it was a bit hard, but we got away and we created so many exclusions on every single board across the province. And we have, dozens of them. So anyone that had this type of email was not getting those emails. They had to add their personal email in. And that was part of the organic work that we were doing. And this is an example of our call hub where we refined a report. After doing that push and getting tagged, I went back to that screen and said import, and I was getting fresh tags and reports, added in. And once I knew the title, we coded it in a certain way, and then we made sure that that was the report with all the numbers that we needed to text was going to be used to be the follow-up. Now, again, like I said, the tools itself were not the goal. They were part of the strategy, the engine of work that we were doing. The ground game is where the excitement was. And I really have to highlight that, since the pandemic and lockdown, members were losing their organic spaces to collect. Schools were taking away break rooms. We saw, a lack of enthusiasm to really hang with each other. Members, because they're overworked, and burdened with a lot because of just the fundamental nature of underfunding, they were sequestered in their own offices when they were marking exams or, papers and whatnot. And we had to really rebuild some of those like organic spaces. So we launched the ground game and use the tools to be the tracking and, of course, the follow-up work that we needed to do. Our provincial executive deployed field staff, so people like me were on the ground, as well as coordinating some of the central campaign. Our local leaders that were elected at each of the boards and, of course, in their units. And we had booked off regional organizers to coordinate all of this. We led thousands of worksite visits, and meetings were coordinated simultaneously. And we was so cool for me to see like, members are taking back their spaces to delve into a conversation. And we tracked this real time. If we knew a worksite meeting was happening, especially one that had maybe 100 people, at a school, I was able to see from the back end how many people clicked onto the survey, and I was able to see who's completed it. And of course, that was important for me. I didn't want to know the answers. The answers were going to be, obviously aggregated, no names, no numbers, nothing about the member, but I wanted to see who completed it so that I know I could follow with them and see how they could be built as a supporter and a champion of education in the long term. And anytime we did, a call hub text itself, using that URL shortener that is built into call hub actually gave us insight. So we took the typeform survey, built it into the text itself, but we tracked how many people clicked onto that survey, and it was around 2 or 3 thousand. I think at the start it was a little higher, or like I think just a little less, and then it just kind of built over time. But we saw people re-engaging with the survey, and it was fantastic to see the metrics that were coming just from seeing things, and if they were completing it, obviously we saw if they completed the form or not. And I will say, full disclosure, not everyone completed that Action Network form for the contest entry. People just didn't care to, do that, and that's okay. So there was a bit of a difference in our Action Network versus our Typeform clicks. But that said, more surveys, the better. And this will show you some of the metrics that we had and a screen capture of our text broadcast. And I forget which one. Yeah, this was our final one that we did. And even towards the end, when we sent this out, we had, over almost 3,000 clicks on that, which was really cool for us. And it showed our reach about what follow-up work we needed to do, but of course, what we need to do from here. Now, the fruits of our labor. We are a labor union, right? We saw this as one of our highest turnouts ever for this survey, where we reached 48%. It's just under 27,000 people took this survey. And for me, as gleefully as I am, like around like data, like I saw the outcomes as, not just like the turnout and the conversation that was happening, but I saw that we were able to capture new information about our members, personal emails, and 7,000 new mobile numbers. It was nuts, really. And if there's anything I will say about educators, they are intellectual. They are, they see a lot of things. They know a lot, but they're also very jaded sometimes and very protective. And it's not a bad thing because they really want to study something in order to, really follow in. You go and ask them for their phone number. You knock on anyone's door, even when you're doing a political campaign. I don't want to give you my personal information, but they volunteered their information. And that was something really cool for us because it's like, wow, like we're rebuilding a relationship as we get into the crux of the work. The result of this, we had a cleaner database, knowing what to work from here. And the members of the authority of their own data, they volunteer to want to learn more. Yeah. And I'll like part of that, tracking that we were doing, we actually did integrations with Google Studio, the Data Studio. So we always had regular updates and pushes around how many people were filling out the survey. So we saw, each time we submitted or we did a push on email and follow up over text, we saw a stark growth, stark contrast, start, incline in the amount of, people uptaking the survey. And it was good for us. Again, all of this is good, and there's could have been some other things that we could have done differently, but this was really great for us to start from. And outcomes, like using these tools really, really helped in proving that our hypothesis is correct. That, campaigns will actually build deeper member engagement and member power. We can see victories. And of course, we're in bargaining right now. We've already started with the government just a few months ago. And, we're going to be pushing hard. But of course, the work from here that we started from the survey is just a launching pad. And our members are workers. They are at work sites. And part of the work that we did was to support the ground game. And the ground game is where we really see the heart and soul of how organizing in unions needs to be, and should be fundamentally. The conversation was continuous. We built a base of members, and we identified some really strong champions and leaders on the ground. And again, a highlight, they volunteered to give their data because they want to know more and they want to take more action. What's also really key, and I don't think oftentimes unions say this out loud, is that we need to learn a lot more. We need to be where the members are at because our members are not just workers at a work site, they are members of the community. They have nuance to them, and we need to be able to build our communications and our methods of, working with them to understand them and be smarter, as a union to advocate and, represent them. In their member-to-member conversations in their organic networks, like we saw that one department leader saying that I'm going to grab, those three people there that are not normally coming to union meetings, at the end of the month. They are pissed off at a lot, so I want to get them involved in the survey, and that's good. We need more of that. We need people to take agency in their union, and this provided them that opportunity. And of course, we identified future paths about how to rehabilitate our data. Keep campaigning, keep running structure tests, use these tools smarter to make things easier for us to do it, but capture it, keep it organic, and keep it going. And of course, for us, organizing is a culture. This is a fundamental change about how unions work and how we organize because it's a culture of reciprocal and continuous engagement. It's not just something, it's a one and done. There has to be a buildup from here and a follow through. And, wherever we go with bargaining, that's going to be part of our work that we have to do. Where what wins we gather, and if there's things that we couldn't win at the table, how are we going to win to get there? We identify our members organically to, we build the fight from, right? So that's a bit of our story, and I'm happy to, whenever there's time, to answer questions, but I'll leave them here, and thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Munib. That story resonates with the Action Network team. This is exactly what we envision when we are building these tools. So thank you for sharing that. I will quickly go over an overview of Action Network pretty quickly. And then please continue to throw questions. I see a few of you have put it in the chat, but feel free to keep adding those questions. So if you're not familiar with Action Network, we are a best-in-class email mobilization tool for your progressive causes and political campaigns, and then as well as your union organizing. So we utilize a cooperative development model where we work with practitioners like Munib and his team, large organizations that have the capacity to help tell us what the movement needs, what our organization's looking forward to, what are some hurdles, and how we can integrate into those programs to help you lead your organizations to get those wins, to reach those activists and to raise those dollars. So we have a full suite, all in one place. So we have your mass email, which Munib has graciously highlighted, with sophisticated targeting, that I think could be useful for you all. We also have fundraising and ladders, and petitions and reports, all to help you fuel your campaign and your program. And we do all of it at a affordable cost, to you, and we work with those partners to keep developing the features that you need. And with that, I'll pass it over to Bridget.
Great. Thanks, Mariah. By interweaving Action Network and CallHub, you get the best of both platforms to truly maximize your outreach. And thank you so much, Munib, for sharing a real-world example today about engaging members to take a survey. And so for some of our visual learners, I wanted to show an example of how we can really use that multi-channel outreach to do this in practice. So for example, it could start with an initial email blast out of Action Network. And the members who complete a survey can get tagged right away, so they can be suppressed from future survey reminders. And then for everyone who didn't take the survey, that can become your target list in CallHub. You can pull them easily from Action Network, as Munib had showed us. And you can also actually pull in your suppressions as well. This would be 0 CSVs and no spreadsheet chaos. So after the email goes through, you've been able to filter it down based on who didn't take the survey. And now you can send your text. This could be a text blast or a peer-to-peer text, especially for some organizations, depending where your opt-ins are. Peer-to-peer texting is what you would need to be compliant. But after that text message goes out with this link, and it was really great to see that link shortener being tracked, but you can actually leverage real-time branching. If they click the link to do the survey, CallHub can instantly tag them, and that tag can get sunk straight into Action Network. But if they don't click, the system can automatically route them into a CallHub phone bank for a follow-up call. And from there, you can just drop them right back into an email series if they didn't answer that phone call. So you really have total freedom to interweave your text, email, and calls into customized journeys, each person getting a different outreach journey based on what they did or did not do. And this really helps you ensure that you aren't pestering someone who has already shared their thoughts while helping you really continue to nudge the folks who are your members who you want to elevate their voice and truly engage. Mariah, we can go to the next slide. And just to give you a little bit of a bigger picture, CallHub is truly designed to maximize your supporter engagement. It helps you really plug outreach leaks and widen your outreach funnel. We have everything from P2P texting, predictive dialers, press one call blasts, and additional features to fix where organizations lose people along their outreach way. So I just want to go over a few of our outreach leaks that we've heard folks experiencing and CallHub's fix for each. So one is the spam trap. People rarely answer calls that are flagged as scam likely or spam risk. And CallHub Spam Shield continuously monitors the number health and can automatically swap in clean local caller IDs on the fly. So what this means is that by bypassing spam labels, you can have over 65% more answers. That's a true brute boost. So your team can spend your time talking to human beings rather than just listening to dials. Missed calls. When someone misses your call and calls back later, we've seen some campaigns struggle to actually engage these folks and it falls through the cracks. But with CallHub's inbound calling, callbacks can be funneled straight to an available team member, which we've seen folks recover an extra 3.5% of their contacts. And then what about that lost momentum? Organizers have experienced this. You're having a great conversation with someone on the line, but once you hang up, they forget to follow through. Well, with CallHub, when a supporter is engaged on the line, you can actually hit a button to just send them the link over text straight to their phone. That means that mid-call or post-call text can give you over a 15% action boost. This really converts live conversations into instant digital actions. So it really helps plug your outreach and widens your reach every step of the way. Mariah, if we go to the next slide. And so bringing these tools together really helps you maximize your engagement. No more isolated tools firing off in silos, but one fluid organizing engine. As Munib had showed us, we have the brain, the arm, the muscle, everything really working together. And so your supporters get a vastly better experience because smart suppression cuts out fatigue and protects your members' trust. And best of all, the bidirectional sync lets your tools do all the heavy lifting in the background so your team can stay focused on what actually matters, engaging your members. Great. So I know Mariah has encouraged folks to put some questions in the chat and in like the Q&A portal. So I'm going to just read off a few of the questions that we've gotten, but please, you can keep adding your questions and we'll be elevating those. So the first question will go to Munib. Munib, thank you so much for walking through this and everything you learned along the way. If you could go back and do it all over again, what are a few other things you might try differently or other approaches you might take?
As far as the strategy, I wish I gave a little more devoted time to just collecting information. Like we needed a bit more of a lead up. Like we asked for everyone to update their contact information within 2 weeks, and in the back to school rush, it just wasn't a lot of time for people to really, settle in. And we could have enacted some tactics in order to do that. So a little more time, I think, more dedication to that would have been good, especially in the buildup of it. Yeah, and I guess as well, like. Hmm. I wish that we had more of our locals seeing, using Action Network themselves, and we've just started, expanding, how many of our locals get it. So we're in a bit of a transition right now. But some of those organic ways of them just updating their list, putting it into Action Network, and having it seed up like into our parent account, that would have made things a lot easier because, they know their members on the ground. They know, and they're in the daily works with them. At provincial office, we have less of a reach with them. But that's something that I wish we could have done differently. And, I mean, going forward, we're doing that right now. And a little more trainings about, how we get into the deep organizing nature. And I think expanding that with our local leaders and building off with our organic leaders as well at the work sites. I think that's probably what I would see a little differently. But yeah, overall, yeah, that's that.
Thank you so much for sharing those reflections. That's great. And for some of us, it's a call to action as well. And then it was really exciting to hear about the 48% response rate. And so I know this was kind of one of those first type of outreach that you had done. And as you look ahead for the growth of your organization and continuing to engage your members, what's kind of next as you think about maximizing outreach and engagement?
Expansion of Action Network and CallHub. What's great about both of them is that you can create sub accounts and then they feed into your central account or your central structure. With CallHub, that's one of the works that I'm going to be doing more. We did pilot that with some of our locals when we were doing mobilization for a provincial by-election. More and more are doing it, but like we need to be able to create them to make them more efficient so they're talking to each other more. As we're learning at our provincial structure, how to do that better, we need to be able to do that on the ground at our locals across the province. And up, there's 37 of them, so we have to make sure we're supporting each of them in their own, kind of particular way of doing that. And enacting that culture of structure tests as well as don't just accept that this is the only time you gather a member's information and that'll just be, good to go. Like it'll get stale dated really fast. So you have to maintain that structure test attitude, that organizing culture of always speaking and working with your members. I would say that is going to be, the important things for us about what our next steps are. One thing I wish we did differently too, and to answer, at the start, um, I wish that we tagged using our call hub back into Action Network. So we'll have to do some of that more manual work about who completed this, who we reached over text, who clicked, and then feeding it back into our network. But it would have been so much easier to just have it all done at the start. And that's one of some of the great features that Call Hub has with Action Network.
That's great, Munib. And I love the way you're like bringing a continuous learning mindset to this. There's always so many new things and features, and part of it is just getting started and then saying, how can we do this better? So that's really great. One of the questions that someone had asked is for someone who's just starting to build this type of outreach. And so, what advice would you have for someone who hasn't really attempted, this type of like outreach before? What should they think about as they're just getting started?
We use a weird analogy, but for anyone like caught up in like addiction, like the step one is to identify that we have a problem. And like I found that in union spaces where like we know it all, we've done it all, we already know our members, but like we continuously don't really just be honest about things. What was great about this, and it was a little hard to kind of just show everyone, is that our data isn't all that good. And I had to just be honest, be like, here it is on a platform. And the works that we did post survey in expanding, and we started using Action Builder for some of our deep, worksite build, mobilization and organizing work, getting into our contract fight. In order to get that data well, we need to have organizing on the ground. But to show it and just be honest that, the data is kaput, and we need to be better at how we capture this data and how we work, together in tandem to do this. Opening that up was a very critical thing. And I guess my advice to everyone is that, start wherever and however you need to, but start somewhere. And it's okay to be honest about how things aren't the best, but it can only get better from here. We have 9,000 new emails now, 7,000 new cell phones. That is like more abilities to contact members that have not been fundamentally engaged with their union. And, there's only going up from here. So start somewhere. It's okay. Just be humble and work your ass off.
Yeah. And Munib, I really appreciate that not only were you focused on, doing that outreach and elevating the voice, but you were continuing saying, how do we collect more and how do we process this? And so there's a lot that you're able to do, which is pretty incredible. Well, thank you again for kind of sharing this story and for elevating member voices. I'll pass it on back to Mariah to close us out.
Awesome. Yes, thank you both for joining us. I wanted to make sure that we caught a few questions that were in the chat. Someone asked, how much does this cost? I'm assuming is that for Call Hub and Action Network for that person, but I can start for Action Network. So we started $15 a month for our movement partnerships, which is the majority of folks who are getting started and looking for an email mobilization tool set. And then if you need a network, that starts at 125.
Yeah. And for Call Hub, we recommend like reaching out to get more about your specific pricing because what we try to do is get discounts for folks. And so if you have a large volume, we can try to get those discounts from the carriers and then we pass those discounts on to you. So we know you're doing a lot of work with less, and so trying to pass that on as much as we can. I also saw a question about some of the numbers. And so one of those things, we have a roadmap. We will absolutely look at that. And another really great feature with our texting, I know we talked about the phone call has spam shield, but for texting, we can really help you with all of the compliance. So as you think of 10 DLCs, some of your teams might be small, like one or two person operations trying to weed through all of the tech and the compliance. So we're here to help partner with that to help make it clear and easy and support you kind of doing that outreach. But we encourage you to reach out to learn more.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, if folks don't have any other questions for us, this is what we'll wrap up today. Thank you again, Munib and Bridget. This is such an exciting use case, great partnership and integration. I hope this was all useful for you all. It was for me as well. And thank you. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Solidarity, y'all. Take care.